Hello and welcome, my name is Ahura and this is my guide to trade in Europa Universalis 4. So let's start with the basics. This is the trade map, and on this you can see some of the basic information you need when you are doing trade. First of all, you can see these trade zones. The trade zones are collections of provinces that trade to the same trade node, and the trade node is what you can see here. The last thing you can see is the trade routes, which are these lines, and as you can see they have arrows on them, and the arrows represent the direction that the trade can travel. So for example, if you take the Sevilla trade node, all the provinces that are colored green here, they will trade all of their trade goods through the Sevilla trade node. And furthermore, trade can be sent to the Sevilla trade node along all the ingoing trade routes, and trade can be sent out of Sevilla through the outgoing trade route. Most trade nodes will have both ingoing and outgoing, but there are special kind of nodes. The Antwerpen and the Venice trade nodes are end nodes, which means that trade only flows into them. So in other words, there is no way to pull money out of Venice or Antwerpen except collecting there. The other type is the outgoing trade zones, like Brazil here, where trade is only flowing out. I think Hudson Bay is another example. Trade is only flowing out, so there's no way to send extra trade into these trade nodes. Okay, so what can you do with these trade nodes, you might ask? Well, there's two things you can do. You can either collect from the trade, or you can send it along the trade routes to the next trade node. Collecting usually requires two things. It requires a merchant, and it requires that you have a province in the trade zone in question. So for example, in Sevilla, I can collect trade because I have a province here. But then you see I have no merchant down here, and that's because I also have my capital in this trade node, which make this my home trade node. So I can always collect in my home trade node even if I have no merchant here. However, over in the Brazil trade node here, I have to actually have a merchant placed in order to collect here, because it's outside my home trade node. The other thing you can do is transfer trade, and that's I'm doing up here in the Caribbean. When I want to transfer trade power, I only need to have a merchant. You don't need to have any provinces, but of course the more provinces you have, the easier it will be to transfer trade, and we will talk about that in a little bit. When you do transfer trade power, you will have to choose which trade route you will transfer it through, and you want to of course choose a trade route that leads to somewhere where you are collecting. One thing that needs to be true in order for you to be able to transfer money is that you need to be able to transfer to a trade zone in range. So, for example, earlier in the game, I might not be able to transfer trade out of some of these trade nodes because they would not be in range of any trade node where I had any power. So you might see, I don't know if I can find out, oh maybe this one. Here you can see the Inca are transferring trade power, but they can't transfer it upstream because they have no power in this trade node. So the only thing they can do is transfer it downstream to this trade node, where they have power. But let's get to trade power to understand this better. Trade power is what you use to actually affect trade. You use it to either collect or transfer trade, and you get trade power from basically two different things. You can get it from provinces, or you can get it from using light ships. Light ships, or trade ships as some people call them, are the ships you can see in this row in the unit section. From the start of the game they are called barks, but through the games they will have different names depending on the technology. They can be called barks, caravels, early frigates, frigates, or heavy frigates. And each of them have different numbers for trade power. caravels, for example, give 3.5 trade power, while frigates give 4, and so on. And whenever your ships protect a trade zone using this button, they will apply all of their trade power to this trade zone. As I said, you could also get it from provinces. All provinces give trade power, and you can see how much down here. Having a coastal trade zone usually gives more, because they have the 1.5 coastal modifier. And also some provinces will have different modifiers, like this important center of trade, or the Guardian Estuary, or I think there are some provinces up here that also give some, like this. Holland has the Rhine Estuary, and there are different kind of trade zones that have different kind of modifiers that makes them worth more. So look for that when you plan which provinces to conquer. If you want to dominate trade, you should go after provinces that has high trade power. Another way of getting extra trade power is through buildings. All the buildings in the trade column, as well as the dock, gives extra trade power, either as local trade power or as a local trade power modifier. Another way of getting more trade power through the provinces is with mercantilism. Mercantilism is only gained through events and decisions, and it gives a modifier of double your mercantilism to your local trade power. So, for example, down here you can see that I gain 34% extra trade power in this province from mercantilism. So that's trade power. There are two other ways of getting trade power, which are your merchant gives a small amount of trade power. I believe it's 2 trade power, so it's really not much compared to a ship, which usually gives from 3 and up. And you can also gain trade power to peace deals. Whenever you beat another country, you can get trade power, half of their trade power in any zones you have provinces in. You will get half of their trade power for the duration of the peace deal. So that is usually 5 years, or always 5 years actually. So that's the ways you can get trade power. And trade power decides how much of the trade you control. So for example, here in Sevilla, as you can see, I control most of the provinces in this trade zone. So I have a lot of provincial trade power, and furthermore I also have a lot of trade ships patrolling here. So I actually control 91% of the trade power in this node, which means I also control 91% of the money. And since I am collecting here, I collect 91% of the money in this trade. So now let's talk about the modifiers that your merchants provide. If you are collecting with a merchant, he will give you a 10% modifier to the amount you're collecting. So for example, here you can see that I am collecting 53.7%, but it's only affected by my trade efficiency and by a decision I have to open up the guilds, or I think it's actually an idea perhaps. Yeah, it's this idea from Portuguese Ideas Group. But if I go over here to Brazil, where I have a merchant collecting, I have a merchant placed here, you can see that I will get 10% extra because there's a merchant present. You can also see here in the overview of the countries, it might be better to look at Sevilla, that there is an icon that shows what other countries have a merchant here. If there's just a line, that means they have no merchant, but if they have one transferring power, you'll see this icon, and as you saw over here in Brazil, if he's collecting, there will be a house. If you are transferring, there is also a bonus. This bonus, however, is 20%. So whenever you can, it's usually of benefit to you to transfer trade and not collect it. You do, however, need to be aware that in order to transfer effectively, you should always transfer to a port where you have a huge part of the trade power, so you can collect most of the trade you are transferring. And you are not the only one who can give a bonus. If you look up at let's look at this, or maybe this. Here you can see that there are 3 countries who are increasing outgoing trade value here. Both Bourbon, Nevers and Castile are transferring trade power, and there are a decreasing amount being added each time, but I believe that it's the first 5 countries who transfer trade power will increase the amount of trade who are that is transferred. So that is also important to keep in mind. Now, what will happen in the provinces that you don't have any merchants in? Well, let's look at that. If you are in a province like this one, where you have provinces but no merchants, there 2 things can happen. If you control a trade node upstream, you will be able to transfer automatically. You will, however, not be able to choose which direction. In this case, there are only one direction, so it really doesn't matter. But over here in Mexico, as you can see, there are 2 directions that I can transfer in, and I'm just transferring equal amounts to both of them, because I have no merchant controlling it. In all our provinces, if there are no upstream trade node, you will transfer your trade power downstream. You can see that here the Inca are transferring their trade power in this node downstream, because they have 3 provinces here, but they have no trade power up here, so they can only transfer their trade power downstream. They can't transfer any money downstream, but they can transfer their trade power down, so they can use the trade power in this trade node instead. So it's usually not as effective, but you can at least still use your trade power. Let's talk about the last things in here. First of all, you'll see your trade efficiency. Trade efficiency is gained through technology, through seditions, and through ideas or events. Trade range determines how long away a trade zone can be before you can use it, and it's increased through technology and ideas. Trade steering determines how much trade you can steer away from a node, how effective you are in steering trade, and it's modified by your navy tradition. Trade income is the total modifier to your trade income, and it's your trade efficiency plus any ideas or events that also can influence this. And finally, there's mercantilism, as we have already talked about. It increases your local trade power, so your provincial trade power. Up here you can see the income you have had the last month from trade, and this graph shows you how big of a part of your total income comes from trade. Down here you can see which countries you are embargoing and which countries are embargoing you. So let's talk about embargoing. Down here in Sevilla, I want to control all the trade. However, France and Morocco don't have anything anymore, but France has some trade power down here, or at least they used to have. But I decided that they shouldn't be able to control my trade, so I decided to embargo them. This means that I will use all the trade power I have to influence their trade. So you will give them an embargo modifier, in this case minus 40.3%, based on the amount of trade power you have and based on your embargo efficiency. For most countries, that embargo efficiency is the same, but as you can see, the English ideas gives extra embargo efficiency, 100% extra embargo efficiency. There is a price, however, to embargoing. For each country you are embargoing, you will have a 5% penalty to your trade income, except for countries that you are rivals with. So Morocco and France, I can embargo for free. So keep that in mind when you are choosing your rivals. Finally, down here you can see all the trade nodes that you are able to influence. And this is based both on which nodes you have discovered and which nodes are in range. So at the start of the game you won't be able to see that many nodes down here, even though you have discovered all the different trade nodes here in Europe. You will only be able to see the nodes that you have actually got in range. So that's all the basics and more advanced stuff about trade. Let's look at the trade ideas. So there are three different idea groups, or rather two different idea groups that affect your trade. The trade ideas obviously affect them. It gives a lot of different modifiers like trade power, trade range, trade efficiency, trade steering, national trade income modifier, and extra merchants. Actually it gives 3 extra merchants, and through the expansion idea you can also get extra trade power and an extra merchant. Furthermore, some countries will give you in their national ideas will give you things like global trade power, extra merchants, national income modifier, and like in the English one, better embargo efficiency. But that's the main way you can influence your trade efficiency. There are also a few national decisions that can impact your trade. So for example, this mining act gives extra production and tax modifiers, but decreases your trade. So you kind of want to choose these based on how big of big your income is in these different areas. So for example, I am Portugal. I rely much on trade, but as a landlocked country like Austria, you will rely much more on your production and your tax and not so much on trade. So you might want to use the mining act. But I think I have told you everything I know at this point, so next point is for you to go out in the game and try it yourself. I'll see you in the next video.